Many small business owners start their business because they want more space and traditional ways of working don't work for them. But then in their business, they replicate them anyway, as I did. My name is Astrid, and in today's episode, I want to share with you how I created my own way of working and my own way of thinking about working. And I'll also offer some suggestions for you to do the same. So grab a cup of tea and let's dive in. So I think the first thing that we need to do is, in order to understand why we think or feel a certain way about working and why we replicate or follow certain structures and ways of working, is we need to think a little bit about the stories that we have been told about work. Like, you need to work 8 hours a day, or only if you are productive, you are worthy, or you always need to work really hard. And I think for many of us, particularly those of us who are good at working, we've been rewarded for working hard, for working a lot, and for being really productive. So it's really not our fault that when we start a business, even if we started with the idea of having more space, and having less pressure, that we still fall back into those patterns, because that's what we've heard around us. That's what we've been taught. That's what we've been rewarded for. And of course, if you look at a lot of business advice, that kind of piles up this whole idea of hustle culture on top of traditional stories about work. Now, I certainly felt the same when I started my business. I have always been pretty good at working and I get a lot of satisfaction out of it, but I would also use it to put a lot of pressure on myself. Before I started my business, I spent quite a lot of time, quite a few years working in academia, where working a lot is really rewarded, right? People don't talk about having time off, or like, having a weekend being for doing something fun. Now, a weekend is another chance to work. And I vividly remember that I would cycle to work. And if I would get to the building where I worked by 8:45 in the morning, which is when a church bell next to the building where I worked, a church bell would sound out at 8:45. And if I made it before that time, I would feel happy. Now, 8:45 may not seem very early to you, but in academia, at least in the department where I worked, there was pretty much no one there at 8:45, right? People had a later schedule, even though they celebrated work and overwork. I was pretty much the only one at work at 8:45. And when I started my business, I took many of those patterns with me. I started working in my business just one day a week next to my teaching job. And for a long time, I was very much aware of having that one day, and I really wanted to do as much as possible in it. Now, gradually, I got disillusioned about productivity culture. I started questioning it, and I really started wondering why I was working this hard. And if I wanted to start my own business because I wanted more freedom, why I would be working the way I worked before in academia, as well in my own business. And I think, along with like health challenges that really made it less of a choice and more of a necessity to work differently, I really shifted how I thought about work. And I think one of the questions that I asked myself is about spaciousness. If I want more spaciousness by running my business, right? My business is an opportunity for me to have more autonomy and more spaciousness. And that also means that I don't want to center work, which I did for many, many, many years, right? Work was very central to my life and I didn't want it anymore. And I see that with a lot of people, and particularly women, often in their 30s and 40s and 50s, often hit a point where they wonder, is this it? This way of working? Is this really what I want to do? And I hit that same point. So I started thinking to myself, what is it that I want to center, right? What is it that is truly important to me? And yes, I enjoy work, and obviously, work brings in an income, which is important. But the things that I love to do are reading, are being in the garden, are knitting, and all of these things I wanted to start to make more space for. And I think the first realization I had around this was that I would save reading or kind of keep reading for the end of the day as a sort of reward for being a good little worker bee. Um, and I just had this like light bulb moment where I thought, I don't want to do that. I love reading. It's like pretty much the most favorite thing I do. So for the past, I want to say like 7 or 8 years, every day I start with half an hour of novel reading. So after breakfast, rather than sitting down for work, I grab the novel that I'm reading and I spend half an hour reading. And initially, that felt really uncomfortable. I really had to set a timer as a way of almost forcing myself to spend that time. But it immediately also felt like such a luxury. I was starting the day with something that was important to me rather than with work or with other people's agenda. And even if it was work that I really enjoyed, starting with reading has been such an amazing choice for me. Other choices I made is not to work before 10 a.m. I've really, over the past couple of years, started to prioritize movement because I know I can feel how important it is to my body and my mind. So I prioritize movement, and not just at the end of the day. I often try to do yoga or take a walk or do Pilates like in the mid afternoon. And as over the past couple of years, my chronic fatigue really got a lot worse, essentially. I've had to take an hour in the middle of the day to rest. And I now explicitly block that on my teaching day, on my business days, and less explicitly on my teaching days. But I explicitly block it on my business days, as you'll know if you've seen my previous video. So by really recentering and really thinking about the things that I want more of in my life that are not work, and that can be stepping out into the garden for 5 minutes for a proper break rather than immediately going back to work when I've made a cup of tea. Um, this is not always easy. I definitely still have moments when I kind of slip back into older habits. And I think they're maybe not as tied in with things like I'm only worthy if I'm productive. But I like to work and I'm good at work and I get a lot of satisfaction out of it. And just the pure fact of having done work, that does something for me. And I sometimes notice that I've got sort of this tipping point where the satisfaction becomes the pressure, and I'm no longer actually enjoying it, but I'm doing it out of pressure and feeling stressed. And that's when I need to remind myself that in my business, I get to decide how I work. And for me, I want to work spaciously. And that means that I don't fill up my days completely with work, that I prioritize other things as well. So if you recognize a lot of what I've said so far in this video, I'd love to invite you to think about what your way of working looks like. And it might be similar, right? You might want movement in the middle of the day. Maybe you've discovered that the swimming pool that you really love is pretty quiet around midday. So you want to start building that into your days rather than going in the evening or going over the weekends when it's really busy. Or maybe you want to start your day reading as well. Or maybe, like me, there are certain demands that either your body or your mind asks of you that you need to honor. And of course, you will have a different life with different sort of priorities and different demands. But if you want to explore this further, I would start by thinking about what are the stories about work that you carry? So what have you been implicitly or explicitly taught about work? Like, you need to work 8 hours a day at least. Or maybe in your case, you were taught like even 10 or 12 hours a day. Or you're only worthy if you're productive. And have a think about where those stories come from. Who modeled them for you? Who gave you that feeling that you were only worthy if you were productive? Because maybe you were that straight A student and everyone praised you if you worked hard. Once you've done that, and this can be uncomfortable, I know, once you've done that, have a think about what you want to center in your life. What do you want to sprinkle into your day that is not work? What do you want to center? What do you want your life to revolve around? And as I said, that could be going swimming, or it could be reading, or it could be painting. Um, and these are the things, I read every morning for half an hour, and that has made a huge difference, even if it's just half an hour. So, what do you want to center more of? And once you've got your little list, look at your calendar for the weeks ahead and where can you explicitly block that time. And I say explicitly because I know from experience that not blocking things can very easily make them slip, because then someone says, oh, can you meet for a call at 9 a.m., whereas you might have decided, oh, that's my reading time, or that's my whatever time. And we feel pressured and we kind of say, oh yeah, sure. um, so really block it. And scheduling software is your friend here. If you work with clients, for instance, or if there's something around availability that's part of your business, you can set up like calendar apps and scheduling software that you're only available between certain hours. You can block things in your calendar. You can be very explicit on your website when you ship products or when you're available to reply questions, to reply to questions, for instance, only on Tuesdays and Thursdays, like I tend to do. So all of these things are ways of centering what is important. And I would love for you to discover your own way of working and to run the business that you crave and that you want, that you started for in the first place. And there's lots more like this kind of reframing in my newsletter and on my blog. And I'll pop some of my favorite posts into the description box, including one that includes a free mini workshop on designing your own work week. So do check that out and sign up for my newsletter. I'd love it if you do. And I'll see you again next time.